It said, I leant upon the coppice gate when frost was spectre grey. Okay, so coppice is, a grassland or a flat land where the trees and, the bushes have been cut, one for the sake of wood, and second for, creating fences. Okay, so what you have to understand is that human beings have fashioned nature into the shapes that they want. I'm sure all of you have seen topiaries. Topiaries are, those bushes that are cut into those funny shapes. They look like birds, they look like animals or people or something. So you see, the way that, we seek to prune and control nature is what Hardy is referring to here. Now, Thomas Hardy, I hope you know, is one of the greatest writers of, English language. And he is a man who has often looked into the relationship between human beings and nature. This entire unit talks about the relationships between human beings and nature and how it has changed over a period of time. Okay, so anyway, I leant upon a coppice gate when frost was spectre grey. So see, frost is this thin layer of ice. It was almost, ghostly grey in color. So what we have to imagine is a very bleak landscape. Okay, it's a very bleak landscape. Okay, and there is this person who is leaning on some bushes that have been trimmed, some woods that have been trimmed, and he's just standing there and looking around. The winter's dregs made desolate the weakening eye of day. It's the last part of winter. Dregs is last part. When you drink tea and there is some, tea dust left in the cup, it is called dregs, not drugs, dregs. Okay, dregs made desolate. So as it is, winter is leaving, and it has made everything seem desolate and sad, and particularly the sun is also setting. So sometimes in countries like Norway, Iceland, etc., what happens is there is winter for 6 months. It's night for 6 months and day for 6 months. Okay, and most of the time people become extremely depressed during the 6 months of night. Okay, because it's always dark and it almost seems hopeless. So now I want you to imagine this evening, where there is a man who is leaning on a coppice. Somebody's mic is on. Mic is on. Yeah, somebody's mic is on. Okay. Yeah, so this man who in the setting of the winter sun is standing by the coppice and looking out at a desolate landscape. Okay, the tangled vine stems scored the sky. Now tangled, mixed up, interlinked. Vine stems are vines. Valli ennu nammal Malayalathilu parayum. Okay, so these vines are intermingled and intertangled, and they seem to go up to the sky and scratch the sky. Score is to leave scratch marks. Okay, when you score something, it is to leave scratch marks. So the creepers are just climbing up, and it seems like they are scratching the sky. Such is their movement. Okay, like strings of broken lyres. Lyre is a musical instrument. Okay, so it is something that you can hold, and it's a stringed musical instrument. So these vines are drooping, and they are sometimes flapping up against the sky, and they look like the strings of broken lyres. All mankind that haunted nigh had sought their household fires. So see, everything, all of human beings, all of humankind is now sitting in their homes and sitting by their fireplaces. There is no one outside. There is nothing outside. It's all desolate, dark, and bleak. Okay, the land's sharp features seem to be the century's corpse outlined. So see, now what you see is, I don't know how many of you have seen Game of Thrones, but you can imagine the winter lands out there in the north. Okay, how there is nothing except for these ghostly shapes of trees and mountains, things like that. That is all that is there. So, and when he says the century's corpse, this poem was written in 1900, which means it was the end of a century and the beginning of the next. Okay, so it's almost like, these sharp features in the darkness. All of this seems very sharp. They stand out like that in the dark. So it seems like, they are all the, the dead remnants of the century. It's all lying spread out there in front of him. Okay, now we go on to the next part. His script, the cloudy canopy, the wind, his death lament. So see, the century, the year is, the century is being personified. Okay, so he says that, the poet says that the landscape seems stretched out, and it seems like the dead body of the century. Corpse means dead body. Okay, so it seems like everywhere you can see the dead body of the century stretched out in front of him. And it's like the crypt is the tomb. So the sky seems like its tomb. Whose tomb? The tomb of the century. Okay, the year, the century, the tomb of the century. And the blowing wind is its death lament. So see, when the wind in the winter passes through these frozen trees. One second. Passes through the frozen trees, it makes this very howling, haunting noise. Okay, the wind through the trees. And it seems like all of nature is weeping or mourning the end of the century. Okay. The ancient pulse of germ and birth was shrunken hard and dry, and every spirit upon earth seemed fervorless as I. So see, the earth is a fertile entity. Okay, earth is ever fertile. Things grow out of it. Earth is a very busy place. Something is always germinating, something is always growing. If something dies, something else takes its place. It's always like that. Okay, but here in the dead of winter, everything, the ancient impulse, see, like the poet says, puka dirikan vaya, like that, earth is something that cannot help but regrow and regenerate. Even during the pandemic times, when there was this universal lockdown everywhere, apparently dolphins returned to their old habitats. The rivers became clean again. Okay, where there was barrenness, plants began to grow. And sometimes, if you cut certain portions of land and leave the vegetation there, when you come back after some time, you find that the earth has claimed it. Okay, so this growing, germinating, regenerating, this is something that is instinctual in nature. But in the dead of winter, all that is shrunken, hard, dry. The grass seems hard, dead, and you can't breathe. Everything, the trees, the sky, wind, everything seemed as devoid of energy, without energy as the poet. Okay, just as the poet was feeling that he's completely drained of energy, he's completely drained of spirit, everything around him seemed to look like that. But okay, now this is the pivotal point in the poem. This is the turning point. But at once a voice rose among the bleak twigs, overheard in a full-hearted even song of joy illimited. So just as he was feeling desolate, as he was feeling broken and sad, he heard a voice among the bleak twigs, among the sad, stark, leafless twigs. He heard a full-hearted song, evening song. Okay, he heard a full-hearted, full-throated song that sang without any, that sang with limitless joy. Okay, joy illimited is limitless joy. So this voice rang out, among the trees, among those barren twigs. This song rang out, which was full of life and hope and optimism. Okay, yeah. An aged thrush. It is an old bird. See, why he says it's an aged thrush? How would you know whether a bird is old or young? You can't. But he thinks that way because you know why? That gives the idea that strikes your heart. Okay, that's why. So an aged thrush is a bird, frail, gaunt, and small. Frail is delicate. Okay, gaunt, bony. It is not a very fat bird. Maybe because in winter, where is it going to find grains? Where is it going to find food? There are no worms in the ground even because everything is frozen. Okay, so frail, weak, gaunt, bony, and small. Anyway, thrushes are small. This is even smaller. In blast beruffled plume. So see, it was hit by a blast of cold wind and all its feathers were standing up. It was completely disheveled. Okay, plume is feathers. Had chosen thus to fling his soul upon the growing gloom. Okay, so imagine there is the dead of winter. It is, the sun has almost set. Everything looks bleak and desolate. Okay, everything looks sad. All of that is there, and the poet is filled with hopelessness, and he imagines that everything around him shares this hopelessness. All the human beings are inside, sitting around their household fires. Everything seems hopeless until this old, frail, bony, malnourished bird that has been buffeted, that has been hit by the wind, okay, sings a full-bodied song of happiness, joy, and optimism. Yeah. So little cause for carolings of such ecstatic sound was written on terrestrial things afar or nigh around, that I could think there trembled through his happy good night air some blessed hope whereof he knew, and I was unaware. So see, think about it. So little cause for carolings. Carolings is singing. So what cause can an old, sick, delicate, bony, small, buffeted by the wind bird have to sing with so much of joy and optimism? Why would it do that? Okay, and he says that when you look on terrestrial things, on everything on earth, the ground is hard, there is no food, the trees are barren, there is no shelter, the winter has descended, it is all dark. Okay, so there is hardly any reason for such for such ecstatic or joyous singing. Wherever he looked, wherever the poet looked, he did not find anything that could have merited this outpouring. Okay, but he says the bird sang with all its heart, with limitless joy. So the poet feels there is some blessed hope, there is some beautiful hope which the bird knew and I was unaware. So see, when it looked through human eyes, what is there? There's nothing. Barren ground, hard ground. Okay, the trees are without any foliage. There is no one for miles around. Everything seems dark, desolate, and lonely. But look at it from the point of view of the bird. The bird is singing with all its heart. An old, frail, bony, small, malnourished, buffeted by the wind. Buffeted, Buffeted. Okay, buffeted by the wind. That kind of a bird sings with unalloyed joy, with limitless happiness and optimism, which means that the bird can see something in nature that human beings cannot. Okay, and this is exactly the theme of this chapter. Okay, the lost connection between human beings and nature and what it has done to us. Okay, because see, often we are so sophisticated. Human beings are very sophisticated. We have a lot of mechanisms. See, you're sitting kilometers away from me, but supposedly you're listening to me. Okay, I am teaching you. All of this is happening. But if an earthquake is about to strike, none of us is going to understand that, right? But we have the Richter scale that will measure the impact or the seriousness of the earthquake after it has quaked, right? But you look at the birds, you look at cows, goats, dogs, you look at wild animals. Just before an earthquake, they will start showing signs of restlessness. Birds fly away from that area. Okay, animals start to pull at their tags, if there are any, tying them down. Okay, they all try to get away from the place. And we say, oh, they have that instinct, they have the sixth sense. They have better sense than we do. Okay, look at human beings. Where are we fit to live in? We are not equipped for the water, but fish are. Okay, we are not equipped to live in the forest, but lions, tigers, giraffe, monkeys, scorpions, everybody can live there. Yeah. We are not equipped to live in the sky, but birds are. Okay, so how did this happen? Okay, how is it that we have lost that instinctual connection? Even when the tsunami strikes, animals know, birds know, they all get away from the surface of the ocean, they all get away from the shoreline. But we don't know. So it's that loss of instinct because we have distanced ourselves from the earth. Okay, we have become less sensitive to the environment, and that is what this chapter talks about. It talks about how literature can become that bridge which can unite, or which can serve to help us understand nature and the environment. Okay, so let's move into the chapter. Shall we do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody has any doubts regarding this particular segment, you can post it in the comments. I will wait for you for 10 seconds. If you have a doubt, just say have a doubt, then I can address that then. Does anybody have any doubts? Were you all listening?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, we were.
Okay, fine. So then shall I go on to the next segment? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Please.
ma'am.
Right. So Darkling Thrush, as I told you, it was written in 1900 at the close of one century and the beginning of one. Okay, and this particular slide will tell you the thematic concept of this particular poem. Okay, so look at this segment. Okay, the song fills him with hope, as he feels there is perhaps something that the bird understands about nature that man cannot. Okay, yeah. The eternal power of nature to regrow, to regenerate, can be felt by the bird. Okay, because see, even the poet has said, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? So maybe that's what the bird also thinks. Okay, if it is winter now, one day there will be spring. That optimism. While mankind has distanced itself from nature and has lost that connection. Okay. Now, what is the theme of this poem? The poem laments the loss of a symbiotic. Symbiotic is mutually beneficial. Okay. See, like we have these symbiotic bacteria that live in our intestines. Okay, in our digestive tract, which feed on the food we eat. At the same time, they help to release very essential enzymes. That's why. Okay. Yeah, so it laments this symbiotic relationship or mutually beneficial relationship between man and nature, as humans have trimmed nature into coppice gates, timberlands, thus making the natural world a mere resource to be exploited rather than a vital part of our world. So see, today when we look at nature, we think of it as a resource that could be exploited, not as nature as an entity in itself, as a vital part of our world. Sorry. Look at people who plant teak trees, teak maram. Why do they plant it? Because they love the tree. Do they give the tree any name like Keshavan, Girishan, Krishnan? No. Right? They say after about 30 years this will become a massive tree, and then we can cut it and sell it for wood. There are vast lands, even in Kerala, where these acacia trees are grown. Why they are grown? They are grown for wood. The government itself grows these trees for the sake of wood. But what has happened is that it is sucking up all the water from under the earth. Okay, because acacia is a very thirsty plant tree. Okay, Now what the government is doing is it is cutting down all those trees and trying to plant more, local varieties. I don't know if you've heard of, trees like Venga and so on, which were, Kerala varieties, which were suited to the climate of Kerala, the water, resources of Kerala and so on. These things like acacia, etc., were brought in by the colonizers and grown here so that they would have enough wood to send back to their lands for furniture, shipbuilding, and so on. Understand? So you see here, nature is being looked upon as a resource that can be exploited rather than a vital part of our world. Okay? So this is the basic theme of the poem. All right. Now we go on to the next one. Now what is the theme of this chapter? Okay, so first and foremost, the chapter talks about the disintegration of man and nature relations. Okay, then the next thing it discusses is about environmentalism. Okay, how environmentalism has emerged as a movement and the significance of the environment in every important political, social, cultural, and economic policies of the present century. See, in today's century, the environment and environment consciousness has become a very great issue. Look at the way that we are dealing with the problem of plastic. Okay, look at how on every one Mahotsav, Gandhi Jayanti, etc., we plant trees. Look at this whole idea of the Miyagi forests. I don't know if you know what Miyagi forests are. They are these small patches of land where people plant these trees and try to regenerate forests. Okay, I hope you've all heard of that man, who is known as the mangrove man of India. He passed away recently. Pukudan he is called. Who used to plant mangroves and regenerate them, because these are all lost resources. With these lost resources, we lose a number of important habitats, species of plants and so on. Okay, and you have these important understandings, accords or agreements between world nations. The best example is that of the Paris Accord, where they said they will bring down environmental pollution by these many degrees in these many countries. And America recently pulled out of it, under Trump. And there's a reason for that. When these Western countries say that they will reduce pollution in their countries, where is the manufacturing going? It is coming to countries like India, Bangladesh, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and so on. It is going to all of these countries. There are rivers in South America that run blue, not that beautiful blue that we associate with rivers. It is because, jeans factories are located by the side of these rivers. And when the dye, they dye the jeans in blue, and the remaining dye they throw into the river. So, literally, it is this jeans color that these rivers are running. Okay, there are coal mines in India where of coal mined out, sometimes fires break out. Okay, and there are areas in India where there is an underground fire burning for the last 100 years, and people living in those areas cannot walk without their chappals. If you get out into your courtyard or anywhere in a park or wherever, you can walk without shoes. They can't in those areas because such is the heat coming. Understand? And the best example that I can give you of how environment has become a very significant social and political and economic, cultural, issue is from Odisha. There is this huge mountain there, the Niyamgiri Hills, they are called. Now, these hills are worshipped by the tribals of Odisha as their gods. And it has a huge amount of bauxite, 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 which is the aluminium ore. From bauxite is when you make aluminium. And there was this company called Vedanta, okay, which brought in investors from all over the world, including the Church of England. Okay, and they said we would like to mine the Niyamgiri Hills. And the tribals protested. And these protests were not heard in India, they were heard in England, where the British people, protested outside the Church of England. And then the church said, we cannot invest in this Vedanta company anymore, and they pulled out. And it's only after that that the Indian government had to conduct a voting among the 12 villages, not villagers, villages. 12 villages worship this mountain. And everyone living in those villages said, please don't take away our gods. Now we will think of those people as primitive, as tribal, as uncivilized. And we would want to give them English education. We would want to teach them maths and science and sociology and everything like that. But the question remains, are they uncivilized, or are we, kind of imposing our form or understanding of civilization on them? Where are they living? In the middle of the forest. Do they know how to live there? Yes. Which means they are civilized enough. They are knowledgeable enough. See, other children, the difference between knowledge and knowledge. Pala tarathila knowledge undu. But we imagine that this knowledge that you and I have, this is knowledge. Your degree is your knowledge. But there are places where your degree is not needed. Thank you very much. That is also knowledge. And there you are not the knowledgeable one. They are the knowledgeable one. If you want more info on this, look at the movie Avatar, the Hollywood movie. Okay, it is almost what happened. Okay. Anyway, so this chapter you can understand if you watch the movie Avatar also. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but in the end, all of that planet comes together to fight against the oppressors. All of it. Okay, that is the idea of deep ecology. We'll come to that next. So today, like I told you, environmentalism has become a movement. Look at Greta Thunberg. Okay, look at the kind of work that she did. Look at the kind of impact that she made, the kind of questions that she asked. Understand? So environment has become very significant, though there are people today who deny that there is anything called climate change. So the need for including the environment as a concern in all aspects of human life came from the West. See, even today, this particular EVS, environmental studies, that you are learning has not been there from a long time. The University Grants Commission, UGC, introduced it as compulsory in all subjects. In all the disciplines, it has become compulsory. Why? Because the environment has become a significant political, cultural, social, and economic conversation. I'm sorry. Yeah, understand. Now, why is it that this has happened so? Why is it that it has become a significant political, social, cultural, economic question? Because this thought has come from the West. The way that we interact with our environment today is the result of the influence of the way that the West interacted with its environment. Understand? So in the West, there was this belief that all of this universe is created for human beings, that man is at the center of the universe, that man is God's greatest creation, that man has been created by God in his image. When the Garden of Eden was handed over to man, apparently God said, all of this is yours to enjoy and do what you want, kind of a thing. Or that is what the West thought. Okay, so this meant that it decided that all of this is meant for me. I can do what I feel like. So there was indiscriminate hunting, felling of trees, indiscriminate, exploitation of resources. And when, that was not enough in their own countries, see, this entire idea of colonialism, why did it come about? Imagine this. There are people sitting in England and saying, I am bored. Let us go to India and capture it. No. Okay, so there was a lot of demand for goods like tea, silk, indigo, opium, and so on. So all these people set out to look for all of these things, timber or wood, tea, cotton, indigo, opium, Okay, and in fact, what the British did was that they grew opium in India and supplied it to China, where even very young people became horrendously addicted to it. The Emperor of China banned opium in his country. He said no more opium, and the British waged a war on China to get the right to sell opium. Just imagine that kind of a world, okay, where we say no drugs, and then somebody attacks our country and says, no, you have to have our drugs. Okay, and this opium was being grown in India, replacing farmlands, replacing food crops. Indigo plantations were also the same thing. They were fertile lands where food was being grown, but the British made sure that all of that was removed and indigo was compulsorily planted there, leading to great problems of famine in India. Understand? So look at the way that, the way we look at our world around us can impact the environment. Now, all of this has led to severe degradation of the environment. Okay, so look at that. People like Peter Singer, Val Plumwood, Peterson Del Mar, all of these people believe that the environment and the natural world existed. I mean, they were talking about how in the West, it was believed that all of these resources existed for the convenience of human beings. But in the East, that is in countries like India, in all of these countries in the East, including China and so on, that was not the case. We will come to that later. Also, these foremost scientists of the Western world, like Francis Bacon, he was a philosopher, thinker, scientist, everything. Okay, Rene Descartes, he is supposed to have said that very important statement: I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum, which means if I think, I exist. Okay, so if you can think, only then do you exist. It's a very, very philosophical statement. And of course, you have Newton. Okay, all of these people talked about nature as being passive, inactive, non-reactive. Okay, so all this made the West feel entitled to cut down trees, to do whatever they feel like, with nature. Do you know when the British, when the colonizers came to India, the number of tigers, lions, leopards, etc., that were hunted down, unimaginable, just for fun. Just for fun. Imagine that. Okay. So these scientists all feel that, that is the people from the previous slide. Yeah. Singer, Val Plumwood, Peterson Del Mar, all of these people feel that the anthropocentric should be replaced with the biocentric. Okay. Which means the anthropocentric is human-centric. Okay, that is the age of the believing that human beings are what matter in this world. Anthro means human, to do with human. Okay, and centric, centered. So all this time we have been believing that human beings are the most vital resource of this century, or of this world. I'm sorry, of this world. Okay, now that concept has to be replaced with something called biocentrism. Okay, now biocentric is where you give importance to all life forms. All life forms are seen as equally important. Okay, and the non-human. See, in the studies like we talk about. Earlier, remember, I think when you were in school, I hope you did this living thing, non-living thing. Find out which is the living thing, find out which is the non-living thing. So non-living thing would be, cup, saucer, spoon, and all those kind of things. Living thing would be human beings, rat, rabbit, and so on. But now, the categories are human and non-human. Okay, which means that, okay, human, we are. But everybody else who's non-human also has rights. Okay, and they are very important presences. So now, the ethical concerns. See, till some time, people just cut down all kinds of trees, etc., when they felt like it. Then it became that when you cut down these trees and so on, the people who are living there, like in the case of the Narmada Andolan, okay, when the people, etc., who are living there, they should be taken and relocated somewhere else. Now, what has happened is that it is not enough just to consider the human beings who live there. You should consider the animals, the trees, the plants, the biodiversity. Do you know it is not allowed to cut trees or even look at the trees? I'm just joking. In the Silent Valley, understand, these ecologically fragile reserves, the creating of reserves, the rights of the entities that live in those reserves, and that is not just human beings, animals, plants, birds, microorganisms, all of these things, everything. Okay. Now, how do we make things biocentric? Okay. So biocentrism, holism, anti-anthropocentrism. Okay. These are the ideas of environmentalism, along with a concern for environmental balance. Okay, see, biodiversity has to be maintained. Biodiversity is a healthy diversity of plants, animals, microorganisms, etc., within a specified area. Okay, if there is, in a state there is only teak trees, it will lead to the natural death of all other organisms that live on other, forest resources. Think about it. Okay, so in the biocentric approach, non-humans are seen as equally important presences and are given all the rights that are meant to be given for human beings. Okay, so what is the core idea of environmentalism? Biocentrism, holism, anthropocentrism, and concern for environmental balance. This has been pointed out by Anna Bramwell in her book, Ecology in the 20th Century. Now, like I said, biocentrism is the significance of all life forms. Holism looks at the way that, all life forms are interrelated and interconnected. We must understand, when we are doing environmental studies, we must understand the fact that nothing exists in isolation. Everything is interconnected. Understand? Everything is interrelated also. That is very important. Okay. Are you following so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. Am I going too fast or anything? Are you able to catch up?
Ma'am, we are able to follow.
Okay, all of you feel the same way? If anybody else feels differently, please send me a message in the chat box if you want me to go slower or anything. Okay. All right. So I will get on with my presentation. Right. We discussed this. Okay. Yeah. Now, another two things that the chapter talks about is our, deep ecology and shallow ecology. Now, deep ecology is a term that was coined by the Swedish scientist Arne Naess. Okay, and here, what is deep ecology? It is something of a more spiritual, a greater philosophical and social understanding of nature. Okay, where you don't look at nature as something that needs to be protected. You look at nature as a part of yourself, okay, as an integral part of your life, and you nurture it as you would nurture a pet or children, or look after it as you would look after your parents. Understand? So you do not look at nature as someone else or something else. You look at it as an extension of your own self. See, like, how you have, some people have this Tulasi Tara in front of their house. Okay. Or, they have a plant or a tree, like that. Or they have a snake grove. Okay. They have dargahs, where there is a tree growing there. What is the tree doing there? Have you ever thought about that? That tree is not meant for decoration. It is meant to emphasize the relationship between human beings and nature, that just as, when you go to pay your respects to the saint in the dargah, you also respect the tree. You understand the relationship that nature has with us, that we all go back into nature. It is a very, very deep relationship. Okay. And this is the best approach in order to incorporate or absorb or understand biocentrism. I'm sorry, in order to understand biocentrism. Okay, so see, in the East, see, you have trees that are worshipped, you have plants that are nurtured, you have groves and dargahs, that are looked after, that have a lot of plants, lot of biodiversity, all of these things. You have mountains that are being worshipped and so on. Understand? So this, it is to make us understand that nature is part of our society. So it is a philosophical thought, it is also a social movement, it is also a spiritual connection. It is these three things. So if anybody asks you what deep ecology is, you can just write this particular segment. Okay, and this I've taken from your textbook, where Capra talks about the spiritual aspect of deep ecology. When he says that ecological awareness is truly spiritual because it is rooted in an instinctual understanding that everything in the world is interconnected, is interrelated. Understand? So, if you want to put it in one sentence, you can say that deep ecology is a philosophical and social as well as spiritual understanding of the interrelatedness and the interconnectedness of everything in the world. Okay, that is it. And also you can add that it makes us better understand the biocentric approach, the need for biocentric approach. It makes us understand the need for a biocentric approach. That is it. Now, as opposed to that, shallow ecology. See, shallow ecology is what most of us and most of the West practices. It is like, where you just correct the consequences of direct human actions. Like there is pollution. Oh, let us cut down pollution. There is deforestation. Oh, let us plant some more trees. See, it is not about planting trees. It is about how you look at a tree and then you nurture it. Then you will not be tempted to cut down another tree. What do people say? If you cut down 10 trees, you should plant 100 trees. What if you didn't cut those 10 trees at all? Okay. Think about it that way. If you don't cut those 10 trees, then you are not ridding, you're not taking away the habitat of the birds, the animals that live in that tree. You are not, taking away the shelter of those small plants that grow around the tree. There is so much of dependency. You are not taking away the water that was being, conserved by that tree, as it, kind of provided a kind of a natural water reserve. You're not doing any of those things. And these 10 trees, when are they going to grow? And 100 trees, 100 trees, when are they going to grow? And when they grow, what will you do? You will cut these 100 and plant 1,000 instead. It is not about that. Okay, so shallow ecology is not as effective as deep ecology because it is only a correction. It is not a solution. The solution can be effected only if there is attitude that comes from within. Understand? So that is the difference between deep ecology and shallow ecology. The Paris Accord is an example of shallow ecology, where they say we will bring down pollution and clear the skies over our country. And where is all this pollution going then? It's coming somewhere else. And I don't know how they do not understand that everything is interrelated. If our water is polluted, that water goes into the ocean, which kills fish, which creates a kind of an ecological imbalance, which will in turn affect them. See, mercury in water is never going to say, oh, I have been produced by India. Let me just stay in the the water limits of India. I will never go to France. Will never say that. I don't know if you know this, but you should look up this thing called the Great Garbage Patch. Okay, Great Garbage Patch, which is a huge patch of garbage the size of France, and it is still growing, which is floating somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, I think. And they have been trying to clean it up, but it is not possible because this plastic, it's basically plastic. plastic, with all the wind and the waves and etc., it is kind of breaking down into microplastics. And this is being consumed by the fish. Okay, but the patch of garbage, nothing can be done about it. And there is this thing called, rubber ducks, yellow color rubber ducks. I hope you've seen those. There was a huge ship carrying these, thousands of rubber ducks, and the ship capsized. Okay, it was wrecked, and all of these rubber ducks were found floating in the ocean. Even now, sometimes, rubber ducks are found floating in the ocean. This happened like years ago. And now what the ocean, scientists are doing is that എവിടെയാണ് ഇത് capsize ആയത്, ഇത് എവിടെയാണ് ഈ duck ഇപ്പോൾ എത്തിയിരിക്കുന്നത്, അതനുസരിച്ച് they are trying to measure ocean currents. Okay, once it so happened, a huge consignment of Nike sneakers, shoes, capsized in the ocean. And then there were Nike, shoes that were floating and coming to America. They came to South America. And then there were people waiting in Japan because the ocean current will take it round to Japan. And they were found there also. So you see how polluting all of this gets. Okay. Now, this almost brings us to the end of the session. Okay. We have this connection between human beings and nature, okay, which is essentially broken, okay, which is essentially broken now, when we are not as sensitive to nature as we should be, ought to be. Okay, so many people believe that literature can help us establish that connection back. Okay, you have Ted Hughes, the anthropomorphism. He used to write beautifully anthropomorphic poems where he would give animals human characteristics. He has written a poem called Hawk Roosting, where there is a hawk that is sitting right on top of great height and it is looking down upon all of creation. That megalomania of the dictator, where he thinks, all of this is mine, I own it all, that kind of, it's beautifully captured in the image of a hawk. There's another one called Thought Fox, where a poet, a writer is sitting down to write, and the coming of an idea in his brain is compared to the way that fox looks out of the woods gradually looking at something, and then it makes a sudden dash across the snow, leaving those footprints. This means the idea is building in the mind of the writer, and suddenly it just passed by, leaving the smell of fox, which means that he has been able to formulate the idea and write it out all on the page. Okay, so Ted Hughes. Okay, so he feels, or he writes about how when we exile nature, or nature has exiled us from its scheme, okay, it can lead to the breakdown of civilization, because exploiting nature is a form of degrading your own civilization, because you lose that essential sensitivity. Okay, you lose sensitivity. So the over mechanized lives that we lead, it has taken us away from our roots, from each other, and also from an instinct based understanding of nature. Okay, see, the understanding of nature has to be instinctual. See, that's why sometimes people say you should talk to your plants because they respond. It is something that Jagdish Chandra Bose has also looked into, that plants react to pain, plants react to music, plants react to conversation. It happens. Okay, and this this detachment, this moving away, has made us very insensitive about our surroundings, and then we need more and more machines to understand natural processes. Okay, we have unscientific homes. In a country like India, we have buildings which have glass windows, glass facades, posh buildings, all reflecting glass. See, in the Western countries, they need that because it's very cold over there. So the glass will maintain heat within the building. In India, what we do is that we build huge glass surfaces and then we put AC inside and increase pollution. See, this lack of understanding of our own climate leads to this faulty architecture, which again leads to a great deal of problems in terms of habitation. Okay, so and like I told you earlier about the Niyamgiri people, those people who live in harmony with nature, we consider them to be primitive. Do you know that in Brazil, the last of the aborigines in the Amazon forest are being regularly tortured and kind of terrorized so that they will leave those lands for forest companies to come and take over? They are fighting with bows and arrows and other, primitive, in double quotes, weapons against these machine guns and machetes just so that they can keep their homes. This is a daily battle for them. What you are studying here today is their daily life. Understand? But we think that we have to modernize them. We have to teach them English. We have to teach them maths. We have to teach them how to, run a shop or, pack things in a box, carry stuff on their head. We have to teach them. But, if you think about it, it's the urban population with such gross unimaginativeness that lacks basic knowledge. So this is it. In the next part of the chapter, it talks about how literature can bridge the gap. Imaginative literature can bridge the gap between humans and nature. Okay, how? Literary works can appeal to human emotions and intuitions. This is from your textbook. Okay, it can make it possible for readers to experience a sense of interconnectedness with all life forms and a sense of empathy for non-human life. See, I was reading this book last year called Gun Island. Gun Island by Amitav Ghosh. Okay, where he talks about how there is this interconnectedness between man and nature, how there is a goddess of snakes, and how she would appear in the dream of a man, and what that man does about it, and how somewhere far away in the Sundarban Islands, there are dolphins that go and kill themselves in the form of a protest. All of these things. Okay, there are snakes that just enter into a very high rise building in Italy. Okay, so it's all part of that way in which nature then comes together to react against the kind of cruelty that human beings are perpetrating, human beings are committing. Okay, so Gun Island. In fact, Amitabh Ghosh has written another. It's a non-fiction book of essays called "The Great Climate Derangement," not arrangement, derangement. The Great Climate Derangement. Okay, you have green ecologists like Vandana Shiva who have written about the problems of exploitation. All of this comes under the branch called eco-criticism. I will come to that. So yeah, now you have Cheryl Glotfelty, okay, one of the most prominent practitioners of eco-criticism, who talks about how this relationship between humans and nature can be expressed in literature as the study of the relationship between literature and the physical environment. So what is eco-critical literature? Eco-critical literature is the study of the relationship between literature and the physical environment, the world around us. Okay, and also what is being done is the texts, the books from the 1970s, a creative fiction, 1970s, etc., are being reread from the environmental perspective, which makes us better understand the way that the relationship between humans and nature have evolved. When you take a book and you see miles of forests were cut down so as to further the fortune of the great empire, it is written with great pride. But when you read it and you think about it today, you will be able to understand the anthropocentric attitude. Okay, that is it. Now, eco-criticism. Again, this is a better definition that I have given you. Eco-criticism is based on the assumption that human beings are, now there's this scientist by the name of Lawrence Buell, humans are ecological or environmentally embedded, which means that we are not outside of nature. We are in nature. We are located in nature. Ecological or environmentally embedded means we are in nature. We are situated or located in nature. Eco-criticism is not just the study of interconnection between humans and between nature and literature, but it is a commitment to an environmental ethic. Okay, it is a kind of commitment that we make towards the ethics of environment, towards preservation, regeneration, towards understanding, kind of establishing a spiritual relationship. That is what eco-criticism is. Now, here you have notes on eco-criticism. Eco-criticism emerged as a movement in the 1980s due to the environmental movement begun in the 1960s with the publication of Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring, 1962. So eco-criticism came about in the 80s due to the environmental movement that came about in the 60s due to the publication of Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring. Now, the term eco-criticism was coined by Rueckert in the 1990s, who was inspired by the scientist called Meeker, who used the term literary ecologies. Okay, so now I hope you understand the trajectory. Okay, in the 1980s, eco-criticism emerged as a movement because of the environmental, movement that began in the 60s with the publication of Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring in 1962. But it was only in the 1990s that the term eco-criticism came about, which was coined by Rueckert, who had heard Meeker's term literary ecologies. Now, what is eco-criticism? It is an earth-centric approach, which talks about this connection between human culture and the natural world. But as I told you, it is way more than that. It is also the commitment to an environmental ethic. Okay, it is the commitment to an environmental ethic. Now, eco-criticism is interdisciplinary. Okay, it is, how else will it be? So it connects biologists, botanists, zoologists, those are natural scientists, physicists, chemists, you name it. Then writers, critics, anthropologists, historians, everyone. You would be interested, or I suppose you already know it, I'm sorry, that, during the time of Emperor Akbar, I hope you have heard of the Thar Desert. Where is the Thar Desert? Thar?
Rajasthan.
Yes, the Thar Desert, yeah, good. Akbar used to go hunting in the Thar Desert because it was not a desert at that point of time. It was a forest. Okay? So, historians. Okay, so you'll be able to see the way the world, its biology, its botany, its zoology, all of this is changing. Okay, that's why. So eco-criticism will ask you to examine yourself and the world around you, and then look at the way that you interact with nature. Something as simple as, do you know that now in places like Punjab, Haryana, etc., they are banning stubble burning. Okay, now stubble is what remains. Once the crop grows and they cut the crop, they're not pulling the rice or the wheat out of the ground by the roots. They don't do that. They just go cut. So about this much of stubble remains in the field. I don't know how many of you have seen fields in your life. I have, and it is very difficult to walk on that because what, the plant just dries up, the paddy or the wheat just dries up and just the stubble remains. Now kutti. You can't just pull it out of the ground like that. So what farmers do is that they just set fire to it. And all of that becomes ash. But this releases a huge amount of pollutants up in the sky. We have landfills. Look at places like Chala and so on. Landfills, Vilapil Shala, all of that. Waste disposal. Something as casual as throwing a can of Pepsi or a soft drink plastic container somewhere out there in the open is your interaction with nature. Understand? So that is what this part of the chapter talks about. Now, from here downwards, what they talk about, are the ways that, the Eastern philosophy, Eastern writers, the spiritual connection, how all of that has come about. So I thought it would be too much information for one day. So this much is enough, is my point of view. What is, one second. Good. Polluted air from vehicles, except cycle, exactly. So this is why, you have a lot of countries now promoting traveling by cycle. You have Mayor Prashant, I think, right? Who is called the cycle mayor or something like that, because he's also asking people to use cycles. But for cycles, again, you need cycle lane. You need, cyclists to be safe. Otherwise, the way the world is going, cyclists will be found flying through the air most of the time. This is what happens. Okay. So have you understood this much?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. It's
Okay.
clear.
So do you think you can manage this now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Perfect. So when can we have a class tomorrow?
Ma'am, tomorrow actually Sapna ma'am has organized a class for us.
What time?
It's from 10 to 11, then
Okay.
12 to 1, then 2
Okay.
to 3.
Okay, fine. Then നാളെ വേണ്ട. നാളെ can you like take some time and study these things and keep them? Can you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And now
Yes,
keep
ma'am.
this. We'll have a class on Friday then. What do you say?
Yes, ma'am.
Sure, ma'am.
Friday, come.
Ma'am, same time.
Yeah, 10:30.
രാവിലെ മതി മാം
10:30. Okay, fine. Okay, that will be cool. So we'll have a class for maybe 1.5 hours, because once I finish that, then I would like to do a bit of revision with you guys. So we will keep it for that. And we'll discuss the questions at the back, and I'll give you notes also. So this I am going to be posting in the class group. Okay, this PPT. So you will have notes to study, and the recording kuda njan onu share cheyidekam. Cool.
Okay.
Okay, so then shall we, any doubts so far? എന്തെങ്കിലും doubt ഉണ്ടോ ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ ഒരു സെഗ്മെന്റിനെ പറ്റി? We talked about eco-criticism, we talked about deep ecology, shallow ecology, we talked about the darkling thrush, I'm sorry, the darkling thrush, and the connection between human beings and nature, and the ideas that Tedious put across. That's about it. ഇത്ര ഒരു നാലോ അഞ്ചോ കോൺസെപ്റ്റ്സ് ഈ സബ്ജക്റ്റ് സോറി ഈ യൂണിറ്റിന്റെ തീം ഇസ് ദീസ് ഫ്യൂ തിങ്സ്. Okay, so we are clear about all of that, or are you just saying this to make me happy?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am, it's clear.
ക്ലിയർ
Okay,
No, ma'am. Yeah.
that is cool. Okay, so thank you everybody, and I will see you on Friday at 10:30.
Okay, ma'am.
Or shall we make it 10? That would be better, no? 10 mani?
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
That
Okay,
way.
ma'am.
Don't go too much on the other side. So we'll keep the class at 10. I will be logged in from 9:45 onwards. So, you can start joining in from that point of time. Okay.
Okay,
Sure.
ma'am.
Thank you very much. And in about 5 minutes, I'll be posting it. See you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Attendance and Kaicheru, Gauri, please.
Okay, ma'am.
Share.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, everybody. You can exit as you're already doing.